Hey guys, hope you are well. So, welcome to the Anime Fictions 2.0. This is the story about what if Naruto has crush on Hanabi and hates Hinata. Part 2. Hope you love first part. Hope you will love this what if. If you did, do subscribe for more awesome what if. Share with your friends and enjoy them. Check out the other videos I have created. Comment down your opinion. Share with your friends. So, without wasting any time, let's jump into the first part. Chapter 11. After quietly sneaking off of the estate, Hanabi stealthily made her way towards the address Shizune-sama had given to her. She had to make this unannounced visit as fast as possible. If they, the council elders, discovered she was off the premises without being authorized to leave, her situation would worsen. She could already imagine them coming up with some crackpot reason as to why she left without telling anybody. She imagined they'd accuse her of planning her escape when she will be proven guilty or some other bullshit along those lines. Hanabi looked at the address in her hand and then at the fading address on the sign in front of her. Sure enough, the addresses matched, but she wasn't sure if she was in the right place. She'd never been allowed to go to this district before and now she knew why. This part of Konoha would be called or classified as a dump or a slum. As she never been here before, she didn't know what term was used. In any event, she was prepared. Although she never visited this district before, she had heard more than enough about it to make her cautious. Still, she couldn't believe Naruto would live in a place like this. She reckoned he was probably a poor ninja or something, which was surprising considering his fame. In fact, she didn't even know what he was famous for, just that he was famous. She figured she'd ask him later. Well, if he was willing to help her, she'd pay him back by giving him a more decent place to live. She could more than afford it. And what made her happy about that was that if she did help him out, she'd be using her own money and nothing from the clan. Hanabi frowned at the houses and buildings with their overgrown yards, graffitied walls, and boarded up windows. Yep, she thought as she passed them, he could do better. She'd see to it that he does better. After all, a Hyuga like herself shouldn't be involved with someone who would choose to live in such an environment. Conveniently for Hanabi, there were few people about on the dilapidated streets, and those who were about blended in with the dirty dumpsters and the ugly trash that decorated the ground. Hanabi roamed the area looking for Naruto's apartment. The paper Shizune-sama had given her had stated that he lived on the top floor of the only 5-story building in the area. She had also said that there was no way Hanabi could miss the structure, as Naruto had put his signature on the building. When Hanabi found the building, she did a double take. Then she grinned. The building was shaped like a rectangle with a square cut out in the middle of it. The square served as a courtyard of sorts. The building, in its entirety, was painted a dull blue color, except for the top floor, which was painted a dull orange color with brighter orange swirls placed at random places on the walls. Thus the building ended up having a single orange stripe. Hanabi chuckled again. She wondered how Naruto managed to persuade the landlords to paint the building that color. She admired the building as she walked through the gates and up the stairs. She counted 4 doors on each floor and concluded that the apartments had to be spacious, as the building itself could take up half of the branch family's training grounds, and the training ground was excessively huge. Hanabi arrived at the top floor and glanced around. There was only 1 door on this floor. She shrugged and walking down the long hallway and knocked on it. She waited a few seconds before knocking on it again. A minute passed and she knocked on the door again. After 5 minutes, she started pounding on the door. She was sure he was home. He didn't seem like the type to rise anytime before noon, and it was only around 10 or so. Hanabi was so into pounding at the door that she didn't realize she'd been pounding on Naruto's chest until he grabbed a hold of her hand. Sorry. Hanabi's apology was interrupted as Naruto yanked her into the room and slammed the door shut. Hanabi stumbled into the flat. She grabbed a hold of a small table to prevent herself from falling down. Naruto scowled. He despised being rudely awakened when he was sleeping. And Hanabi pounding on his door was, by his standards, considered to be rude. He was always irritable and cranky when he woke up early. He stalked past Hanabi and headed towards the kitchen. After pouring himself a cup of juice, he realized that Hanabi wasn't in the kitchen with him. He screwed up his face in annoyance and walked back out to the front. As he suspected, she was still standing by the door, analyzing his flat. "Are you coming or not?" he asked, leaning against the archway that led to the kitchen. Hanabi scowled at him and replied, "You know, standard etiquette states that a person should stay put unless invited in." Naruto scoffed and went back into the kitchen. Hanabi smirked and took her shoes off before following Naruto. She had to say though, his flat looked expensive. Mahogany flooring, satin couches, a flat screen TV that took up half a wall, and lots of space were a few things that she noticed as she followed him. Though, it wasn't until she arrived at the kitchen and peeked through another archway located at the other end of the vast kitchen that she realized the entire top floor was his flat. Naruto settled himself on the edge of the wood and metal island, sipped his juice, and stared at Hanabi for a few seconds. He thought it funny that she matched his kitchen. He could grow accustomed to seeing her in his kitchen. Who was he kidding, he told himself, he didn't even know her that well. The only thing that they'd established was that they were physically attracted to each other. He sighed. He wondered if there would be anything more than physical attraction between them. He doubted it though. She didn't seem like the strings attached type. Little did he know that similar thoughts were racing through Hanabi's mind. So? Naruto started, what brings you knocking at my door so early in the morning? Hanabi scoffed and rolled her eyes. She shrugged out of her Hyuga robes and neatly folded it over the back of a chair. She then sat on a stool that was opposite the island and turned it around so that she was facing Naruto and her back was pressed against the counter. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the regalia she was wearing underneath the robe. Going or coming from a mission? He asked. He wondered if she always dressed like that under those robes. Something told him she did. It left much to his imagination. You know, Hanabi started in a condescending tone, you have bad social skills. I'd like something to drink please. Naruto merely raised an eyebrow and said, so. You come to my house and wake me up out of my much needed rest to ask me for something to drink. Naruto watched as Hanabi's lips quivered for the slightest of seconds. He assumed that was her version of a chuckle. He hopped off the island and fished around in his cupboards for a clean glass. He rinsed it out, then poured her some juice. He handed it to her. Hanabi took the glass and stared at it as if it was some type of deadly poison. She looked up at him, who told you I wanted juice? She asked. Oh, that's too bad, Naruto replied, I only stock juice and ramen in my house. Hanabi drank it anyway. Ah, I need your help with a little problem I have. Hanabi stated. Does this concern the assassination thing? Naruto asked, reclaiming his seat on the island. He'd figured that someone from the Hyuga clan would be seeking him out soon. Seeing as he overheard the assassins talking. It was fate or convenience or luck that it happened to be Hanabi. Yeah, Hanabi replied. She figured it would be best if she got straight to the point. You see, 2 ninjas came to assassinate me a few hours after you left. She blushed. I killed one of them and the other one escaped. The one I killed happened to be a Hyuga from the branch family and so. Naruto listened intently as Hanabi gave him a detailed version of what happened and why she needed his help. I believe someone is trying to frame me. Hanabi concluded. It was the only reasonable and logical assumption she could have come up with. Why do you think that? Naruto asked, quite bemused. The title match for clan leader is coming up. If anything happens to me, for example if I die or become imprisoned, Hinata automatically gets the title and vice versa. Hanabi stated, I think this is all some part of a scheme to ensure Hinata becomes leader. Hanabi frowned and a thought ran through her mind. Would it be that bad if Hinata became leader? The only consequence of that would be her getting sealed. Surely there was some way to bypass that though. I'm kind of sketchy on Hyuga standards, Naruto admitted, but if Hinata won, wouldn't that mean you'd get sealed? Yes, it would. Hanabi replied. And that's the only problem. I'd gladly hand over my title as heiress to her if that stupid sealing rule wasn't in place. She scowled. She detested them and their ridiculous traditions. Naruto lowered his face so that she wouldn't see his smile. He couldn't help it, she looked sort of cute when she scowled. Here she was, asking him for his help, and all he could do was smile at her and think how cute she was. He also found it funny that they'd officially met only 2 weeks ago, and here she was sitting up in his kitchen, like they were old friends or something. So? What do you want me to do about that? Naruto asked, puzzled. He was positive there was nothing he could do about the sealing thing. Or maybe there was something. Hanabi sighed. She felt almost defeated. Well, there's nothing you can do about the sealing thing. But, you can help me out of this trial thing. Shizune-sama told me that you overheard the assassin who escaped. If you can make a convincing argument to the council, on my behalf, that they were assassins, then I'd be home free. Will you do it for me? She swallowed, please. Naruto smiled at her. Yeah, I'll do it. But what's in it for me? This time, Hanabi smirked. She was expecting he'd say something like that. I figured you'd say something like that so. Is a repeat of last night good for you? Hell, she wouldn't mind doing it. She was actually enjoying herself until Kakashi and that pink-haired girl popped up. She had a nasty feeling that they were up to something. Naruto considered her offer. He'd be stupid if he didn't accept her offer, but what's to say that after this whole ordeal is over, she'd go about her business, pretending he never existed. He started, you make an exceptional offer, Hanabi blushed and lowered her face. But, he continued, I'll have to take your offer before my board of directors for deliberation. Give me a minute will you? This will not take long. Hanabi stared at him as he made 3 shadow clones. The clones and Naruto moved to one side of the kitchen and were actually debating her offer. Hanabi could not believe that he was serious. A rare chuckle escaped her lips as the debate was concluded. The clones vanished and Naruto walked back over to her with a mile-wide smile plastered on his face. "Well, the board of directors does not approve of your offer," he started. Hanabi almost fell out of her chair. "However, the board is willing to compromise your offer. Instead of a repeat performance, I want to go on a date with you, a real one. How about that?" "Sure, I guess," Hanabi replied. She wondered when things had become so friendly between them. I guess I'll get back now. I'm not even supposed to be off the estate. The trial starts at 3. You'd better come." She slid off her seat and glided towards Naruto, who merely raised an eyebrow. As an incentive. Hanabi rose on the tips of her toes and kissed him teasingly on the lips. Before Naruto's hands could pull her towards him, she quickly stepped out his reach. "Nah, come and maybe you'll get another one." She quickly slipped on her robes. "You know, you are a very good tease," Naruto stated while he followed her to the door. Hanabi paused before she descended the staircase and said, "I like you. I don't know why yet, but I like you. Expect to get teased often." She stuck out her tongue and disappeared down the stairs. Naruto chuckled to himself. He was so going to enjoy his day. He was going to make it fun, seeing as this was his last day of vacation. Chapter 12. Hanabi silently and stealthily crept back onto the estate. As she made her way around the Branch family quarters, she realized her absence went unnoticed. Any Branch family members she came across either avoided looking at her or sent her glares. However, when she entered the main family compound, she received nods and small greetings from those who thought they were superior to the Branch family. She fixed a scowl to her face and ignored them. As she walked lazily through the house, she realized most of the elders and servants and Branch family representatives who were there earlier were now absent. She figured they were probably in a meeting with her father. She sighed. It wasn't like she was really worried about the trial, because if push came to shove, she could just invoke the Third Hyuga Act, which would, in case she was proven guilty, halt all trial proceedings until the title match took place. The only problem with this was that if she lost the match she would be at the mercy of Hinata. And since Hinata had the Branch family in her bosom, they'd be expecting her to dish out a cruel punishment to Hanabi as retribution for killing the assassin. Speaking of Hinata, she wondered if she had anything to do with this whole assassination thing. Hanabi turned on her heel and headed towards Hinata's room. Hanabi found it strange that no one was casting eyes at her sister. Then again, everyone thought Hinata was a generous gentle soul. The fools, Hanabi thought. As she made her way towards her sister's room, she noticed the door was cracked open a sliver. Hanabi placed her palm on the door and pushed it open. "Hinai. Ta." She faltered at the sight before her. Oh wow, Hanabi thought. So here was her saintly sister pushed up against the wall, hair mustard, skin flush, with one leg wrapped around some guy's back, arms wrapped tightly around his neck, and she was so passionately sucking face that she nor her buddy noticed Hanabi. The fact that the two of them here missing a few items of clothing only made Hanabi deduce that they were about to do something naughty. Hanabi stayed in the doorway unnoticed as the guy buried his head in the Hinata's neck, causing her to throw back her head and moan rather loudly. A malicious grin broke out on Hanabi's face. "Whoa, any louder and people might think you're in pain," Hanabi stated with a smirk on her face. Hinata's eyes flew open in shock. Hanabi. She pushed herself away from her lover and quickly donned her robe, which was pulled around her feet. "Hanabi," Hinata said, out of breath, "how dare you enter my room without announcing yourself? I could have you punished for that." "Actually, dear sister," Hanabi started in a bored drawl, "your door was never closed. It was crack open. How was I supposed to know that you were entertaining somebody in here?" Hinata looked lost for words. She was getting so angry that her breath came out in ragged pants. "Get out of my room." It was then that Hanabi noticed the guy was avoiding looking in her direction. She completely ignored her sister's demands and tried to catch a glimpse of his face. But every time she came close to him, he'd move away from her or deliberately turn his head in the other direction. All she could see was a mass of black hair in a style she would say resembled the back of a small chicken. Darting underneath Hinata's reach, Hanabi managed to grab a hold of the guy. She was about to turn him around when Hinata grabbed her by the back of her robes and flung her forcefully out of her room. Hinata glared at her sister. "You will speak of none of this." Hanabi snorted and quickly kicked Hinata in her shin and fled down the hall into the safe confines of her own room. She locked her door and laughed maliciously. She wondered if Hinata realized her Byakugan was on. She doubted it though, she only had it on for a second or two, just enough to glimpse the guy's face. Hanabi smirked as she smoothed out her robe. She now had something to blackmail Hinata with. She'd been surprised to find out that it was not Kiba, however, she couldn't put a name to the guy's face, though she was sure she'd seen him before. Pushing him and Hinata out of her mind, Hanabi quietly snuck back out of her room and made a beeline for the library. Hopefully, she'd be able to find something in there that would help her case. Naruto walked through the main business square in Konoha in the disguise of an old maid. It was the disguise he always used when leaving his home to go to his other house. Because he was becoming so famous, he figured he needed two houses. His first house was an expansive structure located in the heart of the main business square. This house served as a decoy for the media. In fact, any person who resided in the business square was famous in some way. And because of this, the square was frequented by media vultures waiting outside at all hours of the night, salivating, just to snap a picture of a celebrity. Naruto was smart enough to build his second house in the heart of the slums, the last place any media-affiliated person would think to look for him. And while he was in his house in the slums, he had a shadow clone walking about in his house in the square. Occasionally the clone would come outside to empty the garbage or wave at people, just to give the guise that he really was there. Thus, every morning, Naruto would walk to his decoy house in the guise of an old maid who worked for Naruto. Sure enough, most of his friends knew about his little plan to escape the media, but only Tsunade and Shizune, well and Hanabi now, knew where he truly lived. Oh, and Kakashi too. Till this day, Naruto still couldn't figure out how Kakashi found out. Naruto, playing his disguise well, hobbled through the square with the gait of an old woman. Many people hailed him and made way for him to pass. If it was one thing he learned from playing an old person is that the elderly received automatic respect for everything. They were allowed to skip lines and got preferential treatment to everybody else, even the most famous of celebrities. Naruto smiled wryly at himself, he'd often abused this privilege. In fact, whenever he went to pay bills or do business in the square, he went in the guise of the old maid. He kept telling himself that one of these days he'd get caught. Naruto hobbled up the steps towards his decoy house. He ignored the flashes of light as media vultures took pictures of him as he opened the door. Naruto's maid arriving to work as usual would be the caption of this picture in tomorrow's tabloid paper. He chuckled to himself. As soon as he closed the door, his clone appeared in front of him. While he made his way to the kitchen, the clone briefed him on what all activities happened during the night. He didn't miss much. He vanished his clone and dispelled his disguise. Naruto glanced at the clock. He still had about 2 hours to go before Hanabi's little trial thingy started. Since he thought up a good argument for her while he was walking here, he pretty much had nothing left to do. Grabbing a bottle of juice out of the fridge, he waddled to the living room and switched on the TV. Just in time to catch the beginning of Ino's show. You see, when Ino wasn't on a mission or on an assignment from Tsunade or helping out with her parents' flower shop, she was an anchorwoman on everyone's favorite tabloid channel, Konoha Entertainment. KE was the channel the general public watched when they wanted the scoop and scandals of their favorite celebrities. Naruto could remember several times when Ino had tried to get him to do something scandalous so she could dramatically announce it to the public. Naruto chuckled. Though he had to say, Ino had the face and the voice for it. He turned up the volume as Ino began her show. Good afternoon Konoha, this is your ever favorite and beautiful anchorwoman, Ino Yamanaka speaking. She grinned brightly now, I know all of you are wondering who's gonna be our celebrity highlight for today, well, let me tell you, it's no other than our favorite Hokage hopeful and unpredictable ninja, Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto smirked as a picture of him flashed on the screen. He wondered what Ino thought up this time. Now, since Naruto's fame began to spread through Konoha, everyone's been trying to catch him in some scandalous activity. Her grin got even wider. Well, our Mr. Good Deeds has been good until now. She now wore a wicked grin. Star. It was almost as if she was smirking at Naruto herself. Naruto merely quirked his eye at the screen. They'd tried to pin him down in some scandalous activity before, but it didn't work. He doubted it'd work this time. We, at KE, have managed to get our greedy little paws on a certain item that would prove to all that Naruto Uzumaki is as scandalous as they come. Now, I know you all are like, what is she talking about? But, I tell you, it is very compromising. She chuckled. Now everyone thought that Naruto's love interest was the unyielding Sakura Haruno, the general director of the main hospital, however, this picture proves us very wrong. An intimate picture of Naruto and Hanabi flashed on the screen, and Naruto spat the juice out of his mouth. It was a picture of him and Hanabi when they first met when she'd fallen on him out of the tree. Her hair was cascading round her head so her face wasn't visible. And she hadn't worn her Hyuga robes that night so she would still remain anonymous. But it was clear that she was on top of Naruto in the picture. It wouldn't have been a bad picture if they were standing next to each other, but they were in such an intimate position that people would mistake them for lovers. But weren't they? Well, they had the potential to become lovers. Oh my gosh, Naruto thought. He was so screwed over. At least Hanabi was safe. There are thousands upon thousands of girls with black hair in Konoha. Oh yeah. That's Naruto alright. The question is, who is this femme fatale that has our Naruto in her little clutches? We would love to know. Wouldn't you also like to know how long this affair has been going on? Can you imagine if this chick turned out to be someone important? Or is it a mistress? Oh wow, wouldn't that be scandalously scandalous? Join us next week at the same time and we just might have some answers for you. She smiled dazzlingly. This was brought to you by. Naruto shut off the TV. He wondered if Hanabi saw that. He figured she'd be serious, seeing as her title match was coming up and all. He could already imagine having to implore all his creativity and devising ways to avoid and evade the media. The show hadn't even been over 3 minutes yet and he could already hear the tabloids ringing his doorbell and pounding on his door. As he thought about it, he let out a frustrated yell. There was only one person who was there at the time who could have taken that picture. Naruto gathered himself together. He was going to have a little session with Kakashi. But first, he'd have to duck out the media. Oh well, he thought, time for the old lady disguise again. Hinata paced a path in the floor of her room whilst muttering expletives quietly to herself. Oh wow, I never knew you had such a potty mouth, her lover teased. Hinata snatched a pillow off her bed and threw it at him in retaliation. The guy caught it and chuckled. Don't get mad at me. I told you to come to my place, but no, you were so sure that we wouldn't be disturbed. Hinata sent him a glare. And he smiled wryly at her. The guy glided up behind her and passionately embraced her. He buried his face in her hair and placed a kiss at the nape of her neck. Swaying with her in the gentle breeze that was blowing through an open window, he said, you know, I could take care of her if you want me to. Hinata leaned into the embrace and her anger disappeared. She thought for a moment. No, she stated, I'll do it myself. I know exactly how to deal with her. Her lover released her and pouted. You never let me do anything for you. Her lover whined while twirling her around. Hinata stared into his flawless face and a smirk formed on her face. Really? I was thinking that I let you do a lot most of the time. You did a lot last week, especially last week. Her lover blushed and Hinata grinned. I mean besides that, you always do stuff yourself. I want to help. Her lover said, moving away from her to dress himself. Hinata thought for a quick second. He had wanted to help her for some time now, but she didn't really want to involve him. But she knew if she kept denying his help, he'd do something to help her anyway. And that was what she was afraid of. He could jeopardize her whole plan. Thus she had to think of a way to keep Hai occupied while making him believe he was helping her out. Or maybe, he really could help her out. She was unsure what the clan's next move would be due to this whole assassination attempt on Hanabi. After the whole trial was over and the Branch family was satisfied, people would start pointing fingers at her. And she'd be clouded with suspicion seeing that Hanabi was her opponent and she would be the only one to benefit if something were to happen to Hanabi. Well, Hinata started, if you want to help so badly, you could find out who sent those assassins. That would be a great help. Her lover merely raised an eye. I thought you didn't care about that. As much as I don't want to, I do care. Hinata said truthfully. Regardless of our differences, Hanabi still is my sister. And as much as I like to berate her, I'd miss her if she died. Well, that and I'd be crowded in suspicion seeing that I'm contesting her for clan leader. Aha, her lover said, figuring out a reasoning behind her request. I see, killing two birds with one stone. If you could present the person who hired the assassin to the main family, you'd be a little in their favor. Or if you could prove that there was no assassin and Hanabi simply murdered him, the Branch family would definitely be in your family. Smart, he nodded his head at her in approval. As always, you're quick to everything. Hinata said, smiling at him. She placed a kiss on his cheek. Now get out of here and try not to get catched by the guards. I've work to do. I'll come by you in a day or two to see what you've come up with. Her lover bowed to her in a mock gesture. As you wish, you my lady, he hopped out the window and vanished in a blur of black. Hinata smiled. Now that he was pursuing that avenue, it left her time to devote a lot of attention to Hanabi. She cursed herself for leaving her door unlocked. Well, that's what she got for being impatient. Now, she had to find a new card to hold over Hanabi's head until her lover found out who hired the assassin. Hinata hummed a tune to herself while she made her way to the library for some quiet reading and planning. She was pleased with herself. Her plan was working after all. Occupy Hanabi with some guy so that she'd be too distracted to focus on her campaign for clan leader. It was working well, if she must say so herself. It was a pity that the guy had to be Naruto. The Elder Council was enamored with the Hokage and anyone who had the Hokage in their back pocket would be in the council's favor. And since Naruto was the Hokage's heart, anyone who had Naruto ultimately had the Hokage. That was the only drawback with Hanabi pursuing Naruto. But it was something Hinata could easily fix. Hinata smiled and greeted the few servants and old heads she passed on her way to the library. She was going to look for some Hyuga law that would save Hanabi in case she was guilty of her supposed crime. Why was she going to do this? For appearances and promotional reasons, of course. Wouldn't she look good if she played the concerned sister looking out for her little sister's well-being? Yep, of course she would. Hinata chuckled to herself. Soon, she'd have this whole clan wrapped around her little finger, whether they liked it or not. Chapter 13. After poring over old parchments, books, and scrolls for 2 hours, Hanabi finally unearthed 2 ways she could avoid being sealed if she lost the title match. 1. She could find some way to stall the match until she turned 18, then run away from the clan and hide behind the laws of the Konoha statute, which basically states she could do as she damn well pleased, seeing as she'd be 18 and therefore, legally, an adult with no mandatory obligations. Or, she could go get engaged and marry herself off. Yep, that'd put a halt to everything. Hanabi snorted. Like hell I'd get married. No one good enough for me, she said aloud, speaking to her inner self. Or rather, there's no one willing to take you. Hanabi whirled around in her chair to meet the steady gaze of her older sister. She scowled. She didn't have time to banter with Hinata right now. However, she'd be lying if she said didn't want to irk her. So, done entertaining your guest already? Hanabi said loudly, hoping that a few servants were being nosy and eavesdropping. Did I kill the mood? I'm sorry, I was just looking out to protect my sister's honorable virtue. Hanabi's face broke out in a grin. Hinata had the urge to strangle Hanabi, but if she wanted her plan to work, she'd need Hanabi to agree to a truce. She sighed and with much effort, managed to smile at Hanabi. I'm going to ignore that. Now, we haven't been the best of friends. You don't say, Hanabi interjected sarcastically. She was a bit wary of her sister. She had to be up to something. Hanabi wasn't one to beat around the bush, so she blatantly asked, what do you want? Bribe my silence. I wasn't planning on telling anybody. Well, not yet. Hinata frowned. She knew that Hanabi would be skeptical of any pleasantries presented to her but she'd had a tiny sliver of hope that she'd play along. Oh well, she thought, might as well get to the point then. Actually no, however that would be good also. You know that only puts you on even footing with me. I keep your secret, you keep mine. I actually want to propose a truce of sorts. Hanabi quirked an eyebrow. If Hinata wanted a truce then something was up. However, if she could get Hinata off her back for a while, that'd be awesome. Then she could concentrate on getting out of her problems with the elders, her father, and the council. Hanabi figured it wise to at least listen to what she had to say. Go on, Hanabi said while rolling up a scroll she was reading. Hinata sat up in her chair and cleared her throat. Now, because you've been so busy getting in trouble and sneaking in and out the estate, you've hardly had enough time to prepare for our title match, and I wish to fight you at your best. So, I've decided to ask the council to postpone the match on my behalf until I think you are ready. Hanabi stared at her dumbfounded. What? Believe it or not, I didn't stutter Hanabi, Hinata stated firmly. Why? What do you stand to gain? What do you want in return? Hanabi rubbed her temple as the questions fired out of her mouth. Hinata smirked. This was going to be easier than she'd imagined. There was no way Hanabi would refuse her offer. I already gave you a probable reason why. And as for what I stand to gain is none of your concern. And in return, all you have to do is to continue doing what you are doing now. Which is? Hanabi prompted, gesturing with her hand. Hinata smirked at her sister. Keep seeing Naruto against father's wishes, thus keeping the council too busy to cast their eyes on me. What I'm after is actually for the greater good of the clan. Hanabi eyed her sister suspiciously. I thought you were into Naruto, well not anymore considering. She trailed off. Naruto was just a mere infatuation at the time, Hinata said smoothly. I don't need him anymore, Hinata thought with a chuckle. After all, he wasn't the only one who can tug on the Hokage's heartstrings. All she had to do was feed Sakura a heartfelt story and reel the bitch in. Once she could get Sakura under her paws, the rest would be child's play. I still won't let my guard down, Hanabi said, still trying to figure what Hinata was playing at. I wouldn't expect you to, Hinata replied standing up. Just think about it for a while, she then quietly left Hanabi to muse about her offer. She smiled maliciously. Yep, everything was falling in line. Soon she'd control everything. She couldn't wait to rub it in Hiyashi's face. Hanabi told herself she'd think over Hinata's offer more deeply later. She glanced at the clock on the wall, according to it, she still had about 2 hours to go before Naruto showed up. That's if he showed up. He had better come, she thought. She didn't know what she'd do if he didn't, but she'd think of something. With her contingency plan set and ready if the trial was not in her favor, Hanabi left the library and headed for the kitchen. When she arrived, it was nice and empty. She figured they were probably buying supplies for dinner. So she helped herself to whatever was left over in the fridge. As she finished her sandwich a servant approached her and informed her that she had a visitor. Genuinely surprised, Hanabi asked, really? Who is it? The servant unfolded a small parchment on which they wrote the guests' names. After scanning it for a second he stated. Atura-en. She's a rather old lady. Atura-en, Hanabi thought, she didn't know anybody by that name. She repeated the name a few times in her head then it dawned on her. She had to fight a smile from breaking out on her face. Escort her to the garden please. Let her know I'll be a minute, Hanabi told the servant with a slight grin on her face. The servant faltered for a second. Hyuga Hanabi had just politely and nicely asked him to do something. And she'd said please. Oh wow, this was so going to be big news. He couldn't wait till his next 5-minute break. Right away ma'am, the servant said before bowing and exiting the room. She burst out in giggles as the servant left the room. She had to give him credit though. At least he was imaginative. She prepared another sandwich and pot of tea. Putting 2 cups, the pot, and the sandwich on the tray, she went out into the garden. Atura-san, how nice of you to visit, Hanabi said with a bright and cheery smile. She placed the tray on a little stone block that was in front of the bench. The servants, who were taking a shortcut through the garden, balked at the sight of Hanabi serving someone else with a smile. This odd behavior piqued their interest. Who was this old lady that could make Hanabi serve her? Oh, I decided it was a nice day to come out the house. It gets boring sitting around the house all day waiting to kick the bucket. How nice of you to prepare a snack for me on such short notice, Atura-san said, her voice ancient and crackling, like old leather. Oh, don't mention it, Hanabi said cheerily, playing along with the charade. I'd been meaning to visit you, but I've been tied up. After a few minutes of mindless banter, Hanabi said, it's hot out here isn't it, let's go inside where it's cooler. She figured she gave the servants enough to gossip about. Oh very well. The two of them made their way back into the kitchen, where they stopped briefly for Atura-san to eat her snack and drink her tea. Once they were finished, Hanabi led Atura to a hidden room that was located within the library. Hanabi could only begin to imagine what rumors were spreading around the estate. She figured every able-bodied Hyuga on the main family grounds would have their eyes and ears peeled. You can revert to your normal self now. Hanabi told Atura, we're safe in here. Nobody, probably except the cook, knows this room exists. And it's warded too so no curious eyes can see it. Atura nodded and then exploded in a cloud of smoke. The smoke cleared, revealing a grinning Naruto. So, how was that? Hanabi glided towards him and gave him a peck on the lips. I'll give you points for creativity. She slipped out of Naruto's way before he could grab a hold of her. You were very mean, Naruto said, smiling. That's why you like me, Hanabi said in a teasing manner. Wow, who knew she was good at flirting? Naruto's face turned serious for a moment. You know, that's one of the reasons why I do. He gave her a gaze that made her heart beat a wee bit faster. She blushed and turned around, walking toward one of the chairs in the room. Naruto claimed a seat opposite her and studied the room. It was Spartan in nature, only containing a single cot and a few chairs and a small table. So have you figured out a way to get me out of a guilty verdict? Hanabi asked, trying to get straight to the point. She had an inkling if they didn't get the matter out of the way, they never would. For some reason, the thought that she and Naruto were alone were distracting her. The two of them were alone. In a room that was impossible to find. Alone. And there was a cot. Alone, with 2 hours to spare. Maybe they could. Hanabi? Huh? What? Hanabi quickly asked, surfacing from her rather naughty thoughts. Naruto smirked at her. I wonder what distracted her, he thought. He pondered this for a few seconds. You do realize that we have a good opportunity here. He gave her that come hither look and wiggled his eyebrows at her. He wondered when he'd become so comfortable with her. And he also wondered if she realized she was becoming more open to him. He doubted it though. He wasn't going to point it out in any event. Hanabi blushed and turned her head. Pervert, get serious, I need help here. There's no time for such things. Oh, I'm such a hypocrite, she thought. Naruto merely shrugged. It was just a suggestion. But you're a pervert too cause you were thinking it. Hanabi blushed guiltily. So, but you said it. She covered her mouth with her hand. She lowered her head in embarrassment. How dare her mouth betray her like that? Naruto laughed at her. Oh, wow. You're just as perverted as me. He narrowed his eyes at her. Hanabi the naughty. Heh, I like that. Hanabi squirmed in her seat, a tad bit uncomfortable. Having Naruto call her naughty was stirring up a feeling inside her she didn't trust herself to deal with. She took a deep breath and cleared her mind. Enough teasing, Hanabi stated, getting down to business. So, how are you going to help me? Naruto shrugged and Hanabi almost gave in to the urge to slap him. Now, Naruto chided. I can't really help you if I don't know what you're being charged for. Oh. She gave him a slight chuckle. How did I forget that, she asked herself. They're trying to charge me with murder or at least manslaughter, along with some other trivial things that I can handle. Naruto gaped at her. Murder what? An assassin comes to kill you and they charge you with murder. Hanabi sighed and let some of her sadness leak through the cracks in her facade. The Branch family doesn't like me at all, and most of the Elder Council is turning against me because I don't kowtow to their every order, whim and fancy. You could almost say I'm a black sheep, trapped yet free. Naruto suddenly stood up out of his chair and sat down beside her. Then he hugged her. A simple hug that let her know he was with her. At first she had stiffened up, but then she began to relax. That hug told her and explained to her everything, that for the first time, she found a friend. Chapter 14. Hanabi sighed gently in Naruto's arms. As much as she'd love to stay that way, her moment of vulnerability was over. She wiggled out of his hold and looked at him with careful eyes. Thanks. She whispered, embarrassed. This whole thing was new to her and she didn't want to mess it up. Don't mention it. Naruto said, smiling at her. He adopted a serious expression. Now about this trial thing, seems to me the only way to clear yourself is to prove it was an assassination attempt. That much I figured out, which was why I asked you to come. Hanabi said, Shizune-sama told me you overheard their conversation, but knowing the council they won't just take your word for it. You'll need a good reason why someone will have you assassinated. Naruto commented. To back up my statement. Hanabi frowned, her brows furrowed together in concentration. Logically, the first person I'd point my finger at would be Hinata. Why Hinata? Naruto asked, perplexed. Sure, they didn't like each other, but it couldn't be that serious that she'd try to kill her own sister. We're both heirs for the Hyuga estate. Father is going to retire soon, which means one of us will have to take over from him. Normally, we'd fight a title match, and the winner is the new leader. Hanabi mentioned. But, Hinata doesn't have the drive to purposely fight unless it's for protection. Hanabi scoffed. That's what she wants people to think. She's as nasty as they get. Besides, she always confronts me directly, I highly doubt she sent the assassin. Hanabi pondered the truce Hinata had proposed. Naruto pondered that for a second. If he were to take into account what happened in the Hokage's office, then there would be some truth to Hanabi's words. Maybe Hinata wasn't as nice as she seemed. Well done Naruto, lol, in any event it all came back to Hinata. No matter how hard you think about it, Naruto started, it all comes back to Hinata. The only way you might weasel your way out is if you point fingers at her and threw suspicion in her direction. Hanabi frowned. But my instinct tells me it isn't her. I know it wasn't her. Like I said, she always approaches me directly. Naruto gnawed his lip. You might not have any choice but to point fingers at Hinata. He thought deeply for a minute. If Hanabi wasn't inclined to think that it was Hinata, maybe it was someone else. He thought as he tapped his finger against his chin. Let's just say, hypothetically of course, something happened and both you and Hinata died. Who would be next in line to assume control? Hanabi's brow raised in slight surprise. She hadn't thought of that. I don't really know. She stated after thinking about it. That was a really good question. The bell chimed and Naruto glanced up at Hanabi questioningly. She sighed and replied, it's a time bell, and someone rings it every hour, which only means we're running out of time. She chewed her lip nervously. There was only an hour left before the trial. Maybe Naruto was right. The only thing she could do to save herself would be to cast suspicion on Hinata, whom she knew was innocent. Somehow, that just didn't settle with her. She sighed. Naruto couldn't think of any other way to get Hanabi out of her trial. Pushing suspicion on Hinata wouldn't necessarily clear her name, but it would buy her some time. Though, he knew someone who would know the precise course of action to take, but he didn't really want to go to him. If he went and nagged Shikamaru, his lazy friend would help them, but he'd ask questions. Questions that would inevitably lead to Ino finding out about him and Hanabi, and once that happened, everyone would find out and everything would be hell for both Hanabi and himself. He sighed in defeat. Although I don't want to, I guess I have no choice. I'll say Hinata tried to have me killed. Hanabi admitted. Though, she doubted that it'd do anything but buy her time. Hanabi pushed all thoughts of her predicament out of her mind. She figured they had about half an hour before they had to leave her hidey hole. If things were going to go downhill anyway, she might as well enjoy herself before things started to suck. She deliberately pouted. Hey Naruto. What? Naruto sputtered, suddenly pulled from his thoughts. What happened? Hanabi pouted and watched him bite his lip. She figured that was good. She smirked at him. Distract me? She asked in a seductive tone, well what she thought was seductive. Distract you? Naruto repeated, obviously flustered. Shouldn't you be concentrating on finding a way out of your trial? Hanabi pretended to scratch her ankle and slowly dragged her hand up her leg and let it settle on her thigh. She'd seen Hinata do this before when she was spying on her and her lover or whatever he was to her. I already agreed to blame Hinata. If there's nothing else I can do, why should I hurt my head? Distract me. Hanabi had ever so briefly hesitated doing this, her reason being she'd only just met him, but what the hell, she needed the excitement. It was at this moment she'd realized he was the first boy she'd taken a liking to, and the first to kiss her, and the first one she'd sneaked in. He was a lot of her firsts. Naruto hissed out a breath. He was trying to ignore how sexy it was that she'd run her hand over her leg. And how seductive her pout was. Oh, how he wanted to just snatch her and post her up against a wall. He clenched his jaw. Now was so not the time, but somehow, because they were in the main house, where it would be forbidden, it made the prospect of it all the more exciting. It was quite feasible too. Naruto swallowed and asked, distract you how? Hanabi smirked and slowly crossed her legs, arching her back a little in the process. She let out a raspy breath. She'd also seen Hinata do this. She chewed cutely on her bottom lip. You don't know how to distract me. Naruto opened his mouth and closed it. He moistened his tongue. This was so not happening, he told himself. However, his inner self replied, of course it is, believe it. What happened to the arrogant, hot-tempered girl he'd met only a week ago? He shook his head in reply to her answer. Hanabi smirked and leaned forward, bringing her shoulders together. She watched in glee as Naruto's eyes latched on her chest. This was yet another move she copied from Hinata dearest. She extended her hand and beckoned toward him. Well then. Come here. Oh dear. Oh no. Oh my, Naruto muttered under his breath. How very fortunate and unfortunate was he. Hinata walked quickly through the halls, her hair bouncing with every step. Servants cleared out of her path, seeing that she was obviously in a rush. Damn it, she thought. Where the hell is that girl? In the midst of poring over scrolls to help her dear sister, she realized that the only way Hanabi was going to weasel out was if she blamed her attempted assassination on Hinata. Normally, such a thing like that wouldn't faze her, but lately she'd been dallying in something not quite legal, or illegal for that matter. And, Hanabi casting suspicion on her would only result in her every movement being shadowed, which meant she'd have to delay her plans. She strode up the stairs and pushed open her sister's door, only to find it empty. Damn, where the hell was that girl? She knew she didn't leave the estate because she overheard several servants whispering that her sister had a guest. Hinata paused in the doorway, thinking of every possible place on the estate Hanabi could be. The Branch family compound was out of the question. Hanabi going there would be like putting a live chicken in a nest of hungry snakes. She wasn't in the library or on any of the training grounds, which only meant she had to be somewhere inside the house. She had to find her before her trial and somehow bribe her. Hinata turned on her Byakugan and searched her sister's room. No chakra bodies were present, however she did catch a glimpse of flickering blue from the corner of her eye. She turned towards it and realized it was coming from her room, right across the hall. Hinata smirked. Of course, her room would be the last place she'd expect her sister to be hiding in. But what the hell could Hanabi be doing in her room? She turned off her Byakugan and barged into her room. Since all the servants would be heading toward the trial hall, she could raise all the hell she wanted. Hanabi, what the hell are you? She stopped suddenly when a kunai was pressed to her throat. She swallowed and suddenly stilled. What do you want? She asked quietly. Well, you're not Hanabi, then again, the orders were to kill the heir. Didn't really state which one. Too bad for you. Just as the assassin drew back his hand to slice her throat, Hinata released sharp chakra from her entire body, pushing away her assailant and his kunai. She bounded towards her window and faced her opponent, who was dressed in the typical gaudy assassin outfit of all black. How typical, she thought, some people just had no fashion sense. Who sent you? Hinata was cut off again as the assassin rushed her. This person is good, she thought, as she parried all of his blows easily. But I'm better. She twirled on her heel and delivered a chakra-enforced kick to her opponent's gut. The assassin had tried to cushion the blow by blocking with his arms, a feat which was in vain as the blow shattered his forearms and sent him through the wall. Too bad for you, Hinata chuckled while walking towards her supposed assassin, who had managed to sit up. Now, tell me, who sent? Hinata barely dodged the kunai that came flying out of the assassin's mouth. In the time she took to dodge, her opponent had run through the door. Hinata thought maliciously, I love it when they run. Using her Byakugan, she easily tracked the assassin. Servants and guards gave startled yelps as Hinata and her prey played hopscotch around them. Shuriken and kunai flew randomly about them, breaking through windows or sometimes striking aloof bystanders. The chase led them to the gardens behind the council meeting room which, conveniently, was used as the trial hall. Hinata dodged several kunai and a vicious kick with a handstand. She then countered with a mean kick to her opponent's already broken arm. It wasn't until she was a safe enough distance from her opponent that she realized they were right behind the trial hall. It was then that she realized a way to postpone Hanabi's trial. And it would be very dramatic. She grinned. If you tell me who sent you, I'll spare your life. Hinata suggested. She quietly gathered chakra in her palms. It doesn't matter. The assassin rasped. If I don't kill you, I'll die anyway. In a blink of an eye, Hinata was crouched in front of the assassin, with her palms on his torso. Then, die now. Before the assassin could draw back, Hinata thrust her palms in the assassin's chest. Jayuken. The assassin flew through a small rose bush and through the wall of the trial hall and came to a rolling stop in front of the table of council members. The assassin struggled to sit up, but the damage was too great. With a shuddering cough of blood, the assassin died. The bell chimed signaling the turn of the hour, and Hinata smiled to herself. Her timing was perfect. She didn't doubt for a second that she looked damn dramatic walking through the debris of the wall. She could feel the stares of shock and awe of everyone in the room on her. She chuckled inwardly at the attention. Hinata was a badass and she knew it. "Hinata!" Hiashi exclaimed. "What is this?" Chapter 15. An assassin, Hinata stated, taking labored breaths to calm herself down. "Lord Hiashi, stay back please." Hiashi's guards jumped in front of him. "Please," Hiashi said with disgust, pushing past his guards heading toward the dead assassin. He turned towards the head of security for the Hyuga compound. "Kazama. How is it another assassin got into the estate without your knowing?" Kazama faltered for a moment, then said, "Hiashi-sama, there were no reports of a breach of the estate." Hinata crouched over the body, pulled off the mask, and gasped. "What? Who is it?" Hiashi demanded, elbowing his eldest child out of the way. He inhaled sharply. It was a Hyuga. From the seal on its forehead, someone from the branch family. He moved from the body, and the small crowd that was in the room for his trial gasped and murmured at the obvious branch family member. "This is highly suspicious." One of the elders who sat on the council exclaimed. He continued, "How is it that a second branch family member would try another assassination? This is what I was warning you about, Hiashi. It's an attempt for a coup d'etat. I suggest an immediate lockdown of the branch family estate until an inquiry has been established." This brought an uproar from representatives of the main family household and the branch family estate alike. A lockdown was akin to prison sentence with maximum security conditions. Such unfounded allegations. Another elder from the council exclaimed amid the clamor. "Just like the main household to cast the blame on us. How do you not know it wasn't someone outside the estate? For what reason would someone outside the state have to meddle with the Hyuga, much less the main household?" The first elder replied, "Hiashi, I implore you to sanction the lockdown. They cannot be trusted." "Are you implying we're criminals?" the other elder angrily asked. "It has happened before. History often repeats itself," the elder shouted. Their banter ignited an even greater noise. Hinata slipped away ever so vaguely during their state of confusion. Hiashi stood there while the small crowd bickered, tensions rising. If he didn't handle this correctly he might very well have a coup d'etat upon his hands. But honestly, 2 attempted assassinations, an air match, and now this tension between the families. How easier it would have been if Hiashi were alive. As the clamor grew louder and louder, it became increasingly difficult for Hiashi to hear himself think. "Silence. All of you. Or suffer sealing." He yelled into the noise, using a bit of chakra to help project his voice. The crowd instantly quieted. "Great. Kazama." "Yes, Hiashi-sama." The guard replied, eager to do something. Being the head of the guard, he was in a pretty hot shoe. Since he came in contact with the branch family more often than the main, he figured it'd be best to await an order instead of taking a personal action that might cast him and his guards in disfavor to either households. Hiashi turned to him while taking off his robe and throwing it over the body. "Alert the Anbu, have them send an examiner over for the body. Increase the patrol among the branch family estate, also, have someone see to the repairs of the room." He turned to the crowd. "The council will break until there has been a general meeting on the affairs going on in the estate. All trials and previously scheduled meetings with the Grand Council will be temporarily on hold until further notice. All existing sentences are still in effect until stated otherwise. Any new situations that require a council trial will be held by your inclusive council in the estate you reside. Until further notice these orders are effective immediately. You are dismissed." With hushed murmurs everyone slowly filed out of the room while trying to get a proper glance at the body. When only Hiashi remained, he summoned 2 guards to guard the room and the body and gave them strict instructions to keep anyone unauthorized out. He then took himself off to his private quarters until the Anbu arrived. "Something's amiss," Hanabi stated while escorting Naruto, or rather Aturus-san, back to the entrance. "How do you figure?" Naruto asked while glancing around. Surprisingly, after they left the secret room, they didn't run across anyone. "Despite we stayed in that room past my trial time, no one has been looking for me," Hanabi replied, slowly dawning on her usually demeanor. She continued, "I wonder what happened." She used her Byakugan while they walked, stretching her vision to see if anything unusual was happening. Naruto glanced at her and was tempted to grope her a bit but decided it would look odd for an old woman to be inappropriately touching the air. He studied the little veins that appeared around her eyes while she peered about discreetly. This girl was growing on him. During their intimate moment in the little secret room, she shared with him her reason for her behavior, why she's the way she is. He found them to be similar in a sense. They were both lonely people. He grinned, they were also both attractive hormonal young people. The implications were endless. Thinking more of the room, they were quite different as well. Where his emotions showed on his face and lives in his words, hers are portrayed in her actions. The way she clung to his body, just showing the need for company, a desire to be seen other than a puppet. Her passionate kisses were sometimes fierce with anger, soft with sadness, gentle with empathy. The strong hands that held his head in place, that raked his back, that roamed his body, were just eager with excitement. The sounds, the scents. Ugh, he thought, there was no denying they had some kind of bond on some level. Besides somewhat fulfilling a physical need for both of them, the short time in that room also brought an understanding between them. He wondered if she felt the same way. His desire for her company was only growing stronger. "God heard me." Huh, Naruto shook his head to clear his thoughts. "What were you asking?" "I asked what were you thinking?" Hanabi replied. She was finding him to be oddly comforting. "Oh dear," Naruto started, making sure to stay true to his disguise, "you don't want to know. But I'll tell you anyway. This old woman had thoughts that resurrect these old breasts of mine, as well as replenish the water in this old well that has been dried for many centuries." The smallest of twitches appeared around the corners of Hanabi's lips. "Really, for an old hag like you, you should retire from such thoughts. I doubt that dust factory of a body can even produce enough steam for moisture, much less a full drop of water for a well." Naruto chuckled. Such description. "I was right, something is amiss. There's some clamor at the Branch family estate. I wonder what happened." Hanabi stated, tilting her head ever so carefully to the right. Naruto looked around and only saw the decorated pathway that was leading to the main entrance to the Hyuga estate. Sure, there were buildings a bit in the distance around them, but there was nothing amiss he could see. "Really? I don't see anything, how are why right? Fancy eyes you got there." He teased. "I'd hope you weren't oogling my naked body." Hanabi made something akin to a snort. "Like your grotesque body is something to look at. Please, we Hyugas have a strict code of moral honor about the use of our Byakugan." Though as she signed him out the estate, she casually mentioned, though sometimes duty dictates a call to. Forget about it, as it may. She gave the slightest tilt of her head in acknowledgement as Naruto walked away chuckling. When he was a good much away, the guard said, "Hanabi-san, you should not be out. There was another assassination attempt. There is unsettling tension. It'd be best if you stayed within the main household." Hanabi thanked the guard, a relatively young one. Probably fresh from the academy, she supposed. And how he'd addressed her, she assumed he must have not heard much about her. He flustered a bit at her gratitude. Hanabi turned and ninja sped her way back to the main compound. She figured she'd bring herself up to speed about the assassination attempt. Reaching the compound, she covered herself in a servant's robe as to avoid people and headed towards her father's private quarters. Chapter 16. Hinata sat in the common gardens, deep in thought. She had it all figured out. Her plan was going to be flawless, but now there was only one slight hiccup. However, she could handle it and in fact use it to her advantage. Yes, she thought while tapping her chin, she would no longer need her original plan. Whoever sent the assassins did her a favor. Until that situation was sorted out, the air match would be postponed indefinitely. However, if her father remained true to form, the inquiry would be performed as soon as possible and in no time things will get back to normal. So her task now was to find some way to keep the tension up. As the person who killed the latest assassin, she dared not go into the Branch family at this moment. She leaned back a little and exhaled. "Something bothering you?" Hinata swiveled her head towards the voice and saw Niji standing there. She didn't even hear him approach. "Niji Nai-san, when did you get here?" she asked, smiling at him. Niji sat next to his mysterious cousin. "A few moments ago, are you here escaping the clamor as well?" Hinata nodded. "I assume all the elders will be looking for you now." Niji sighed. "Thankfully Mamiha Ba-san scared them away for now. But truthfully, I've come to ask, how are you? You're not worried about yourself? Someone in the family has it out for you and Hanabi-san." Hinata shrugged. "I'll be fine, I can hold my own, however I'm not too confident about Hanabi. She's been getting in all sorts of trouble with father lately." Niji smirked. "Oh, I think she'll be just fine. She apparently has her own agenda from what I've heard. Though we should be careful, Hinata. I wonder what he knows on Hanabi," she thought. Maybe she was able to enlist Niji to aid her in her troubles. Why should we be careful? Shouldn't we watch out for Hanabi? Despite our issues, she really does worry me at times." Niji folded his arms and stated with cold confidence, "I think it's someone from either the main household or the Branch household who's behind all of this. If you think about it, it's like we're being set up." "Why would you say that?" Hinata asked, a little bit cautious. "She'll definitely have to choose what she says wisely, else he might catch on. But Hiashi Sama's retirement approaching soon, an heir has to be named. Seems to me someone is trying to remove the current heirs so they can easily slide into the spot as clan leader." Niji whispered. Ears were everywhere, and with such tension in the estate, anything could be used as a weapon. The ambitious will use this tension to their own benefit, and he'd prefer if nothing he said would help them. Hinata pondered a bit on what Niji was saying. It was credible enough. If he was right, it would seem someone was entering into her game. I wonder. Niji-sama. Lord Hiashi requests your presence. A servant interrupted, appearing out of nowhere. Niji stood and said, if you could Hinata, pass it on to Hanabi. With that said, he left with servant. It wasn't until some minutes that Niji left she realized he only told her the obvious. She pondered some more for a bit before getting up. Maybe she should go into the Branch family after all. Start a few rumors and get herself into the good graces of the Branch family. She'll visit the family of the assassin first. Give them her bullshit sympathy and play the empathy card. That should work nicely in her favor. Hanabi entered into her father's chambers via the servant's entrance. It was the first time she had done so, and she had to admit, she felt a good rush knowing she might hear something she shouldn't. She tiptoed along the hallway that would take her to a room right before her father's chamber. As she slowly made her way, she thought of her predicament. It was high time she restored herself to her former state of being and get the ball rolling. She had a match she didn't wish to fight in, but had no choice, and she also had an investigation on her hands. Maybe the recent incident with Hinata would clear up her case. Thinking on it now, it was ludicrous to believe she had cause to murder someone from her own clan. What reason would she have for trying to assassinate herself? At most, she figured it'd cast suspicion on Hinata seeing that the match was looming, but most of the main family knew she didn't really want to fight her sister. She's told them that, much to their dismay. Her arguing with the council was why her father and most of the main family was riding her so hard. She remembered that night quite vividly. Flashback. Hanabi walked into the council room, annoyed. For what reason the council deemed it necessary to interrupt her while she was eating, she didn't know, but it had better be something important. Good evening, Hanabi, one of the council members greeted. Hanabi stared at the speaker. She'd prefer if they got straight to the point, her food was getting cold. Hiashi cleared his throat. Father, elders, Hanabi spat out, giving the slightest tilt of her head in greeting. Oh, how she despised the council. A few seconds passed where no one said anything. Hanabi stared at the 7 faces who were sitting behind the table. A few were expressionless, the others a bit uneasy. She'd decided they all had 5 seconds to speak or she was leaving to resume her meal, then go to bed. Just as she was about to turn to leave, one of the elders said, right, Hanabi, we've decided that we would like you to be the heir. What? Hanabi said with genuine surprise. One of the other elders explained, yes, we would like you to succeed Hiashi in place of your sister. Hanabi thought for a minute. She hardly cared about the affairs of her sister, but as far she knew it was tradition that the firstborn succeed the clan leader. Furthermore, she had no desire to lead a clan, nor be pushed into the Branch family for that matter. For what reason? She asked. Another elder spoke this time. We believe that Hinata does not have the requirements needed to run and lead the clan efficiently. She has proven herself to be too soft, whereas you possess the cold relentlessness of your father, a trait that is shown to be beneficial in a leader. The clan would continue to flourish under your reign. It is an honor for you to be in such a position. Never before has there been a female clan leader. With the direction from the council you can make Hyuga history. Hanabi folded her hands across her chest, feigning contemplation. She scoffed. I refuse. What was that? Hiashi asked. A few of the elders stared at her as if she committed some great act of insult. Hanabi shrugged. I said I refuse. I have no desire to lead this clan, nor do I wish to usurp Hinata in such a manner. Hiashi stared at his daughter. Hanabi, such an offer isn't made every day. You should reconsider. Hanabi raised her head in slight defiance. I have considered and I'm telling you no. Do you not comprehend? One of the elders spoke up, I told you Hiashi-sama, she would not easily agree. I suppose she feels she has an obligation to her sister. Hanabi laughed, obligation to Hinata. I'm as obliged to her as I am to this clan, which is by circumstance and not choice. The council gasped. Hiashi exhaled, his daughter was truly testing his temper. Hanabi, mind your tongue. Another council member suggested, Hanabi, I'm confident you wish to be leader, but due to your sister's nature, you may not wish to hurt her, but I can assure you Hinata will be fine with it. Perhaps if you do not feel sure with this unconventional method, how about you fight her for leadership? Title matches have been used before to determine a clan leader many times. An excellent suggestion. One of the elders agreed. So it is settled then, you will fight with Hinata and assume the role as clan heir. You will do well as leader. We can now rest easy knowing the clan is in capable hands. Another elder stated. Do you agree Hiashi-sama? Hiashi gave the slightest nod of his head. Hanabi stood there in awe. Look at them going on as if she agreed to their decision. So I am to take directives from you guys as clan leader then, Hanabi thought. Don't get it twisted or misconstrued, she started, I have no intention whatsoever of being clan leader. I have no desire to fight Hinata to be trapped down by the clan. You won't use me as your excuses to hold on to power, to have another few years of seeing things run how you guys wanted. If you think I'll accept your ridiculous position so you can lead through me, you're terribly mistaken. You'll have a better chance of pushing your views onto Hinata. Such ungratefulness. How impertinent. All the members of the council started to argue amongst themselves at her outburst. Hanabi, you will fight this match and you will become clan leader. Or you will sorely regret it. One of the clan elders shouted. The other elders agreed. The only thing I would regret is being born into this generation of Hyuga where you guys are still alive. This conversation is finished and I will hear no more of it. Hanabi turned on her heel and exited the council room, which was in a mild uproar. Her food was probably cold now. She kissed her teeth. Then flashback. The ridiculousness of her clan knew no end. She scoffed at the memory and continued on her way. She was now in the room that led to a small opening in her father's closet where the servants came and went when cleaning up. Just as she was about to barge through, hoping to take her father by surprise, she heard a familiar voice and decided to eavesdrop. Sounds like Niji Nai-san and father, she thought. She climbed up on the ceiling of the room and crept closer to the doorway. She'd be able to hear them better, and if anyone unexpectedly opened the door they wouldn't see her right away and she'd have time to disguise herself with the servant's robes. "God, you wish for me to do what exactly?" "I think I misheard you," she heard Niji say. "You heard me correctly. Just prepare yourself for it. I don't have much faith in them." "As you wish, uncle." Hanabi waited until she heard Niji leave and her father reclined back in his chair, then she hopped back down to the ground. She pondered what she just heard and filed her thoughts on it for further contemplation. It was time to face her father. She silently crept through the entrance, being as noiseless as possible. She ducked under the little overhang and came upon her father sitting in the chair. "Hello father," Hanabi casually mentioned. Startled, Hiashi knocked over a pot of tea he was drinking and swiveled to see his daughter standing behind him, looking bored. "Did I startle you?" "I'm sorry." Score one for Hanabi, she thought. It wasn't easy to startle her father. "What are you doing here?" Hiashi sputtered in feigned anger. He felt a bit embarrassed that he was caught off guard. "I didn't summon you." Hanabi took a seat and sat down in one of the chairs by the little table where the tea was currently running off of. "I summoned myself." Hiashi eyed his daughter in surprised. It would seem she relocated her spine again. The council had effectively broken her spirit in the weeks following her refusal to usurp Hinata. "For what reason?" he asked while cleaning up the mess he made. "I heard there was an assassination attempt on Hinata," Hanabi stated. Hiashi reclaimed his seat. He took her silence as indication that she wanted him to update her on the events that happened. Just this once, he'd entertain her. With all that was going on and all that would be going on, he'd need his rest. Yes, there was an attempt on her life. However, she terminated her threat and like your incident, the assassin was revealed to be a Hyuga, which has resulted in clamor. You would know this if you were there. Why weren't you present? Where were you?" Hanabi shrugged in reply to her father's questions. Her focus was more on getting behind these assassination attempts. "I had a visitor I had to attend to. And concerning my trial." Hiashi scoffed and pinched the bridge of his nose. Times like these was when he missed his wife the most. "Visitor? You bring that boy back on this estate and I will find time to deal with you. Understood?" Hanabi stiffened and slowly swallowed. How did he know? How could he possibly know? That room was supposed to be foolproof. Hanabi gave the slightest inclination of her head in acknowledgement. Hiashi paused to take a sip of his tea. "As for your trial, I spoke with the council and it was determined that your trial would be indefinitely dismissed in light of recent events. However, that does not put you out of the light. An investigation is ongoing." "What does that have to do with me? You can't think I set up a hit on myself?" Hanabi asked. "An investigation is ongoing," Hiashi repeated. "Now, take your leave. I must rest." "Understood," Hanabi muttered. She got up and exited the way she came. Avoiding her usual paths of travel would keep her inconspicuous for a while. She had some thinking to do, plans to make. An investigation, she thought. What was there to investigate? It'd be near impossible to find out who sent the assassins. The most that could be done was point fingers and hope the person felt paranoid enough to mess up. Well, since she was cleared of her trial, she could invest her energies into something a bit more fruitful. She'd put all thoughts on family matters aside for now, it was high time she got some fresh air. A quick trip off the estate should do her some good. She grinned wickedly as she neared her room. "What were you able to find out?" Hinata asked, shrugging out of her. Her lover shifted from her lap. Running a finger down the center of her chest, he said, "It'll cost you." Hinata smirked. "If it's something good, I'll pay you bonus. Now tell me." Her lover shrugged. Didn't find out much really. I'm still spying, though I can tell you the assassin wasn't the one you ordered. Seems like someone was a bit quicker than you. Thank you for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see the next part, don't forget to turn on notifications by hitting that bell icon. Please like, subscribe, and comment below to let me know your thoughts. Check out my other videos for more content you might enjoy. Until next time, take care.